On June 26, 1990, Phoenix got so hot that they literally had to shut down the sky. Commercial airliners, we are talking massive jets weighing over 200,000 pounds, were stuck sitting on the tarmac at Sky Harbor Airport. Nothing was wrong with the planes. The crews were ready to go. The problem was the air itself. At 122 degrees, the air became too hot and too thin for the laws of physics to guarantee a safe takeoff. The flight manuals and engineering charts used by the entire airline industry just stopped working because the numbers simply didn't go that high. The city was physically incompatible with its own technology. But honestly, that daytime high isn't what's actually killing people. That isn't the number that should scare you. The real catastrophe happens after the sun goes down. It happens in the dark. Imagine it's midnight and the temperature is still sitting at 97 degrees. The asphalt that baked to 170 degrees a few hours earlier is still breathing heat right back into the air. Your body physically cannot cool itself down. It's an attack that happens when you're supposed to be getting relief in the quiet of the night. They call it the nighttime assassin. It's a diagnosis, not a metaphor. In 2023, this heat helped kill 645 people in a single county. It became just another statistic, a number that grew every year until people treated it like background noise. The city was basically engineering a public health crisis that had no modern precedent, and then for a minute, it looked like they solved it. The deaths started to drop. But nobody is talking about the real catch here. The worst of the heat hadn't even arrived yet. The money that paid for the solution is about to vanish, and the nights in Phoenix are only getting hotter. Did Phoenix actually learn how to survive, or did it just run out of time? Phoenix was never supposed to be this hot. The city started as a paradox, a green oasis in the middle of the Sonoran Desert built on ancient irrigation canals, followed by massive agricultural fields and citrus groves. Those orange groves weren't just for making money, they acted as a natural form of climate control. The soil and vegetation worked together to create an environment that cooled down drastically at night. The desert has a natural rhythm. You get brutal heat during the day, followed by a rapid, merciful release of that heat into the clear air after sunset. For generations, that was the fundamental promise of living in the valley. You survived because the night gave your body a chance to recover. Then the second half of the 20th century hit, and the boom started. An unstoppable wave of Americans headed west looking for sun, space, and a fresh start. Phoenix stopped being a modest farming town and turned into a massive metropolis. With every new house, road, and parking lot, the original desert got paved over. The soil became concrete, and the groves became asphalt. We systematically dismantled a natural cooling system and replaced it with a man-made heating element the size of a city. Engineers call this thermal mass. All that concrete, asphalt, steel, and glass acts like a giant battery. It spends the whole day soaking up solar radiation under the relentless Arizona sun. Then at night, when the natural desert is cooling off, Phoenix starts releasing that stored energy. The roads, sidewalks, and brick walls exhale heat back into the air all night long. This is the urban heat island effect, and Phoenix has built one of the most intense versions of it on Earth. The data is clear. On a typical summer night, the temperature in downtown Phoenix at the airport can be 10 to 14 degrees warmer than in the surrounding rural towns. If you drive an hour out to Wickenburg or Queen Creek, the air actually feels different. It's cooler because it still follows the ancient rhythm of the desert. But back in the city, the heat stays trapped. For decades, the main response was just to install more air conditioning. It was a brute force engineering fix for a problem that was getting exponentially worse. But the air conditioners themselves became part of the problem. Millions of units are constantly pumping waste heat out of buildings and straight into the superheated urban air. That mechanical exhaust alone adds up to 2 degrees to the nighttime temperature. The very machine meant to save you is making the outside hotter. It's a perfect feedback loop. The numbers show just how fast this is accelerating. Before the year 2000, Phoenix averaged fewer than 5 nights a year where the low temperature stayed above 90 degrees. After 2000, that number climbed fast. 5 became 10, then 20. In 2024, the city endured 39 nights where the temperature never even fell into the 80s. That is a record. Think about what that does to your body. Your body is a machine that has to keep its core temperature stable. When you're exposed to extreme heat during the day, your heart rate goes up, you sweat, and blood redirects to your skin. It's an emergency state that you can't sustain forever. The night is when your system is supposed to reset so your heart can rest. But when the nighttime low is 90 degrees, that recovery never happens. For people without shelter or working AC, the body stays in an emergency state for days or weeks. The stress builds up until organs start to fail. That is how the heat kills. It's not a sudden, dramatic collapse in the afternoon sun. It's a quiet, systematic breakdown over days and nights because the city doesn't offer a place to cool down anymore. The records just kept falling. In 1974, Phoenix was shocked by 18 straight days at or above 110 degrees, a record that stood for nearly 50 years. Then in the summer of 2023, the city hit 31 straight days at or above 110. They didn't just break the old record, they blew past it. The next year, in 2024, a different record fell. Phoenix suffered through 113 consecutive days where the temperature reached at least 100 degrees, lasting from late May all the way to mid-September. For a third of the year, the concept of a mild day didn't exist. That same year, they had 70 separate days over 110 degrees. The heat stopped being a temporary weather event and became the baseline condition. The human cost exploded. In 2023, the Maricopa County Department of Public Health confirmed 645 heat-related deaths. It was a mass casualty event unfolding in slow motion, block by block, night after night. Inside that number was a detail that flipped everyone's assumptions about who was dying. Of the heat-related deaths that happened indoors, roughly 88% occurred in homes that actually had an air conditioning unit. On the surface, that makes no sense. The lifesaver was right there. But when investigators looked closer, they found that in 70% of those cases, the AC was broken or it was working but turned off. The issue wasn't a lack of technology, it was a lack of money. The electricity bill was too high, the repair cost was too steep, or the landlord wouldn't fix it. It's a story of poverty and isolation where the margin for survival became zero. Having an AC isn't enough if you can't afford to turn it on. That paradox proved that technology alone could never solve this crisis. By the end of that 2023 summer, the city and county had to admit that treating extreme heat like a temporary hurricane or flood was a failure. They needed a response on the scale of a systemic public health emergency. Back in October of 2021, the city of Phoenix established the Office of Heat Response and Mitigation, the first publicly funded city department of its kind in the U.S. The director, Dr. David Hondula, a former environmental scientist, was tasked with a job that had never existed before, leading a city's official war against its own heat. After the 2023 death toll, the focus shifted heavily toward actively intervening in the deadliest part of the crisis, the night. Dr. Nick Staub, the chief medical officer for the county's public health department, runs a sophisticated heat death surveillance system. The data showed that the unhoused population was bearing the brunt of the crisis, accounting for nearly half of all deaths. The cumulative stress from the nighttime heat was the primary driver. Without the ability to reset overnight, the days of heat just pile up. So the county, city, and various nonprofits expanded their network of cooling centers and kept them open later into the evenings and on weekends. They realized a cooling center that closes at 5 p.m. is useless to someone trying to survive a 95-degree night. Then came the logistics. Having a cooling center doesn't matter if a person in heat distress can't get across town to use it. The city used federal COVID-19 relief funds from the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, to pay for free rides on services like Lyft to bridge that gap. They distributed water, ice, cooling towels, and ran public campaigns in both English and Spanish. And the effort actually worked. After a decade of terrifying increases, the number of heat-related deaths finally started to drop. From 645 in 2023, the number fell to just over 600 in 2024. In 2025, it fell again to roughly 427, which is a nearly 34% reduction from the peak. It was a massive achievement. Phoenix successfully bent the curve and saved lives, even as temperatures kept breaking records. But that victory is incredibly fragile because the expanded cooling center hours, the free lift rides, and the mobile cooling units were paid for with temporary federal pandemic cash. It was never a permanent funding solution for a permanent climate crisis. That money is running out. The federal dollars are scheduled to expire at the end of the 2026 heat season. The entire survival apparatus is facing a financial cliff. Local officials are scrambling to find alternative funding to keep these programs alive, but the clock is ticking. What happens in 2027 when the money is gone, but the heat is still here? Do the cooling centers go back to closing at 5 p.m.? Do the free rides stop? Does the death count start climbing again? To make matters worse, the heat itself stopped playing by the rules. The threat started arriving earlier than ever. On March 20th, 2026, the temperature in Phoenix hit 105 degrees, which is insane for a month that is supposed to be part of the mild desert spring. That early heat wave had immediate consequences. In that single month, officials recorded 28 potential heat-related deaths. To put that in perspective, in the previous 6 years combined, there had only been one death recorded in March. The enemy arrived before the season even started. The preliminary numbers for the summer of 2026 are already tracking in the wrong direction. By early July, Maricopa County had confirmed 18 heat-linked deaths, with 215 more under investigation. That pace is already outstripping the numbers from 2025 at the same point in the year. The progress is already slipping. Phoenix is trapped between a climate that gets more extreme every year and the economic reality that survival is getting harder to afford. They figured out how to save lives, but they haven't figured out how to pay for it long term. The desert doesn't care about budget meetings. The science here isn't a mystery, it's a case study in unintended consequences. The city is an engineering marvel built for a climate that doesn't exist anymore. Arizona's state climatologist, Dr. Aranan Safel, points out that the crisis is a combination of global and local forces working together. Globally, greenhouse gases trap heat like a blanket. Randy Cerveny, a professor at ASU, notes that carbon dioxide traps the heat collected during the day, making the nights hotter, one of the clearest signs of climate change. But Phoenix has its own hyperlocal problem, the physical material of the city. Decades of development choices transformed the valley into a giant heat sink. Every square mile of asphalt, concrete parking garage, and dark roof absorbs solar energy instead of reflecting it. In the afternoon sun, the air might be 110 degrees, but the surface of the asphalt can hit 170 degrees. That is hot enough to cause third-degree burns to human skin in seconds, which is a massive danger for the unhoused population who might fall on the pavement. These superheated surfaces radiate that stored heat for hours after sunset, keeping the urban core hot. The historical records show this clearly. From 1933 to 2008, a 75-year span, Phoenix recorded a total of 109 nights where the temperature stayed above 90 degrees. In just the last 5 years, the city blew past that 75-year total. The rate of change is exponential. It's a trap. A hotter city needs more ACK, which pumps more waste heat onto the streets, which gets absorbed by the concrete, keeping the city hotter at night, which drives up the need for more ACK. The city is trying to fight back. The Office of Heat Response and Mitigation is experimenting with reflective cool pavement coatings, planting thousands of trees for shade, and changing building codes. But these are generational projects. They are trying to reverse a century of development decisions one street at a time, and it takes a lot of time. Meanwhile, the heat keeps coming. The funding cliff looms at the end of this year, and the death toll for 2026 is on a dangerous trajectory. Can the long-term fixes arrive fast enough to replace the short-term programs that are about to expire? The heat in Phoenix is now the central organizing principle of life and death. The cooling center, the free bus pass, and the outreach worker with water are vital instruments of public health. Yet their future is completely uncertain. The city proved it could slow the rate of death with enough resources, but that proof came with a price tag that temporary federal funds covered. Phoenix is the canary in the coal mine for places like Houston, Dallas, Miami. In cities across Spain, India, and the Middle East, all of them are watching their temperatures climb and staring down their own urban heat island effects. Phoenix is just ahead of the curve, showing us the future of urban life on a warming planet. What happens here next will be a lesson for everyone. If the city can integrate these life-saving programs into the core budget as an essential service, it provides a roadmap. But if the funding disappears and the death toll climbs again, it sends a darker message that even when we know exactly how to solve a problem and prove the solutions work, we can still fail simply because we lack the will to change our definition of an essential service. The nighttime assassin doesn't care about budget cycles or political debates. As long as the city holds its heat and the nights refuse to cool, the threat remains. The enemy is the air itself, and right now, the clock is running.